Welcome everyone. My name is Elise de Tooy, the Teaching and Learning Librarian of the Library and also the Program Director for the day. It is my privilege and pleasure on behalf of UJ Library to welcome you all to our first virtual teaching librarian webinar. We are also honored to have our Executive Director, Professor Maria Frahm-Arp, our keynote speaker, Professor Jonathan Jansen, and speakers Dr. Connie Bitsow and Ms. Janine Leroux with us today. Just a few housekeeping rules before we start. This session is being broadcasted live on Facebook, so kindly share and repost the live stream. The recording will also be available on the library events website and the library YouTube channel, which will be available to you to post the event. The chat function is not available for attendees. You can, however, write your comments and questions on the Q&A option at the bottom of your screen. Attendees will not be allowed to raise hands. This function has been disabled. Attendees' videos have also been disabled, and questions will be attended to at the end of each presentation. You are requested to put your speaker on mute at all times. The organizers will mute your speaker if it is disturbing to the audience. Our speakers are all remote, so please forgive us for any technical transitions. We trust that you will enjoy our presentations, and I am looking forward to hearing each of our presenters today. It is now my honor to introduce to you our Executive Director of our library, Prof Maria Frahm-Arp. Prior to joining the library, Prof Maria was the head of Department of Religion Studies in 2016, and in 2017 was the Vice Dean, Teaching and Learning in the Faculty of Humanities. She is also an Associate Professor in the Department of Religion Studies. Over to you, Prof.
Welcome everybody, and thank you so much for the introduction. We started these teacher librarian seminars last year at the University of Johannesburg because we strongly believe that libraries are central to all places of learning. And we wanted to create a space in which we could come together and think about libraries, not just in the academic space of a university, but the broader space of communities and schools, and to celebrate the incredibly important role that teachers and teacher librarians and librarians all play in the learning space. In light of this, I thought I would start today's seminar by sharing a couple of highlights from the Times Higher Education conference that happened remotely last week. A lot of the ideas that I'm going to share are really big picture ideas. Obviously, much more was shared in the conference, but I've taken out things that I think are particularly useful for us to think about in the South African context. This is a kind of summary at a very high level of talks from people from all around the world in different higher education spaces. One of the things that I thought was particularly interesting was how people continue to speak about the importance of physical spaces. The picture that I have up is a picture of the University of New York campus. And the VC of that university was sharing with us how in her particular university, like many other universities abroad, the importance of their physical location is central to the survival of those universities. So many people come to New York City University because they want to study in New York, being at the center of fashion or art or photography or architecture, whatever it is that they've come to study is so important for them. And the physical locality of the university is possibly one of the most important draw cards. You see the same phenomenon in universities in Britain. Many people go to study in Britain because they want to learn English, they want to understand British culture. And so, for example, many students from China are given bursaries by their government to go and study in Britain. Studying virtually does not give students the same exposure. So I was interested to note how many universities talked about the importance of physical space and felt that for them, it was a real challenge that physical space was no longer something that they could offer, particularly under COVID and its varying forms of lockdown. Many people also talked about the physical importance of spaces such as libraries as places for people to collaborate, particularly for people to think creatively. And within the library spaces, we have been having conversations around this for many years and have seen in our different environments the importance of the actual physical library space as a place of learning and innovation. For many people, online learning had lots of positives, but also a few negatives. On a negative side, people spoke about the loss of community in the physical sense, but several people spoke about communities emerging in different ways in the virtual reality. And some people argued that for their international students, the virtual space was creating ways for people to link into community, which was not always as easy in the physical space. Large classes, people felt, could be accommodated in an online environment. And I got the distinct impression that in some ways, large classes almost benefit better from the online learning space than small classes. Small classes of 50 or less students have the wonderful ability to be very interactive in a face-to-face sort of environment. But as soon as you're 200 or more people, you begin to lose this. And in an online environment where you can create communities via WhatsApp or Blackboard or any other learning integrated software, large classes in the online environment can be facilitated in such a way that everybody can ask questions. This is not always possible in the face-to-face environment. One of the big positives that a lot of people highlighted, and which we've definitely noticed at UJ, was the clarity of information. A lot of students have commented that the online environment has forced their teachers to put all the material online. And with that, when it comes to exams, students have had access to all that information and haven't been missing lecture notes because they weren't at a particular lecture. Students who are shy have been saying that in the online environment, they are able to ask questions, particularly because in some of these platforms, students can ask questions anonymously and so feel less shy than they have done when trying to speak to a lecturer face-to-face. Another interesting element was accessing lectures. This seemed to be something that was more of a global north, global south, or well-resourced small universities versus under-resourced big universities. So, for example, students in China did not complain about not being able to access universities. Many universities in China have particularly small classes of maybe up to 30 students, and everybody has residential living space on campus. So for these students, accessing lectures is not a problem. But in universities like Kenya, which are very big, lots of students attending, people traveling in from all sorts of different areas, students often miss lectures. And so accessing lectures, students reported as being easier in the online environment, of course, when they had access to connectivity. Ethical considerations in assessment was an issue, and there was quite a lot of difference between people in different parts of the world and how they were managing online assessments and making sure that students weren't cheating. One of the things that I thought was particularly provocative and interesting was a lot of principals, presidents, and vice chancellors talking about free online courses and free education. One particular president of a university was talking about the fact that we now have a plethora of courses all online and actually all available. So why do we not make education free for refugees? We all know that one of the reasons, or one of the things that holds refugees back, is their inability to access the education space in the countries that they are hosted by. A lot of people also talked about affordability of education, and this led to quite a debate. Are we going to have different streams of education within one university? For example, is the University of Johannesburg going to be offering online education at one rate and residential education at another? We are definitely not thinking of anything along those lines at UJ. But some universities are thinking about that, and it raises all sorts of interesting questions. And then, of course, there's the ever-present discussion about things like Google University. As many of you will know, Google is thinking of or planning to set up a university. In the Google University, a module will cost about $50. You would be finished your degree within 2 years and basically be assured of a job somewhere within the Google machinery. Many people are arguing that this kind of education is very technical, and how are we going to be developing skills like ethical thinking, understanding of social behavior, understanding of what makes people people? Who am I? Am I because I think or because I interact with other people? These are all the sorts of questions that a Google University education will not be offering students. And it came out in many of the conversations that many of us think that one of the most important things we do at schools and at universities is to help people socialize and think about what it means to be human. There was a lot of emphasis on rethinking teaching. Many of you are going to smile at this particular slide because this is not something new, but I did get very much a sense that we are really going to shift in the next year or 2 years in our pedagogy and what we think we're doing when we're teaching and learning. So for a long part of our history as schools, and to some degree universities, memory and memorizing things has been very important. Now, I'm not for a moment suggesting that when you learn a new language, you don't have to actually memorize the words. And I do think that memorizing things has a particular place, but I think it's a limited space. And when, as universities, and we focus primarily on exams that test memory, I think we have a problem, particularly in the fourth industrial revolution. And so lots of people were talking about how we have to move our assessment into assessing for problem thinking and solutions. We should be not assessing for memory, but thinking critically, problem solving, decision making. Now, as I say, we have been talking about this for many years. But what has been emerging is we haven't really been doing that. And for people who have actually participated in online assessments, there has been a real move to starting to assess for critical thinking, problem solving, and decision making, because if you're testing for memory, anybody can find that information on Google in the time that you're giving them to write an exam. So where does that leave us as information managers, as librarians? I think it leaves us in an incredibly exciting space. I have moved out of teaching in the academy into being in a library, and many people ask me why I made this move. And for me, teaching is my great passion. I really think that you can uplift a society through excellent education. But excellent education starts when we have resources and access to information. And information, I think, is at the heart of learning. And this is why libraries, to me, are possibly of the most exciting places in the information and learning environment of the contemporary age and the world that we are moving into. Most of all, students at school or at university need to learn how to find information. Then they need to learn how to analyze and assess that information. And then they need to learn what to do with it. And I really love this last picture because it's a complete reinvention of what you use an umbrella for. The umbrella is turned upside down. And I sort of think of these umbrellas as the bucket of information that somebody has found and analyzed and is now using in the right sort of way and environment. As I say, none of this is new. We've been talking about this for a long time. But I think that the game or the discussion or what we're going to be expecting of our learners around this is going to increase exponentially. The fourth industrial and the fifth industrial revolutions are revolutions where everybody has access to information. Now, of course, we have seen that one of the big divides of COVID is that not everybody has the same access to information. And we know that there's going to be an extraordinary information gap. And lastly, we need to think about who produces this information, who consumes it, and what do we do with it. And for me, what was very exciting about the Times Higher Education Conference, and what I think we need to be thinking about as librarians, as teachers of information science, is what do people do with information and what is the social impact of that information? And I think that this is going to be one of the areas that is going to grow in relevance in the coming years. So with that as a very quick overview, I wanted to set the scene for today's conversation. And I'd like to thank you all very much for joining us. It's wonderful to be able to have so many people from all over the world joining us and sharing in this conversation, thinking about the role of the teacher librarian in shaping the learners of today and tomorrow. I hope you're going to have a very stimulating and exciting seminar and that you're going to enjoy the 2 days that we spend together. Thank you very much and have a wonderful seminar.
Thank you so much, Prof. And this is what a wonderful way to introduce the topic of our webinar by giving us an overview of what is happening in teaching and learning and the library globally, as well as during COVID.
The University of Johannesburg, the future reimagined.